So, what's up people and welcome to the Mission 114 discussion of Spy Family. So Mission 114 came out a while ago, and as always I will leave a link to this mission that's currently being shown on the publisher's official website, Manga Plus, for free to the North American audience. So if you're interested, I will go take a look at it before they pull this mission back. Okay, so Mission 114 starts a completely different story from 113, which if you recall, was all about the antics of Anya with her two cronies now, Freddy and Tertius. But 114 moves to another character which is oftentimes questioned as, is this one of the favored characters in this series? And that is, of course, Yuri. And it does provide a little bit of insight into the plot, but overall, I found this chapter to be very interesting, not for the plot side, but for a much more kind of deep philosophical side with regards to this particular character and the interactions that he has in this chapter. And if I was to put a theme around it, it would be the understanding of acceptance. And I'll go over that a little bit later. But this chapter starts out with Yuri being the secret police officer, having to interrogate a bunch of people, which I find to be very curious. I'm wondering if Tatsuya Endo's trying to make a point with regards to the type of people that Yuri is interrogating. For it seems to reflect on some of the things that may be going on with the world today in terms of misinformation or disinformation, or even in terms of the conflict between what a person says and what they're acting. And I don't want to go into too much detail with regards to that because I'm not particularly a political expert. But it is curious how this particular story falls into some of the things that you often see in the news these days. And to give you an example, the first person that Yuri is interrogating is this person that talks about diversity. Yes, diversity. And once again, why I say it's a conflict with regards to what that person's talking about and what they're acting is, of course, the theme around diversity is acceptance. Once again, the theme of acceptance. And yet, although this person is promoting acceptance and how people have to accept other people's feelings, this person is not about to accept any feeling from Yuri and talks about how these people who don't agree with her should burn in hell, right? And so what they're saying to what they're doing seems to be completely in conflict. And of course, the other person that Yuri interrogates is this person that talks about the deep state and how there is conspiracies that are going on and how all of this evil is going on underneath all the truth that is being told and how they're getting that information through the tabloids, which in this era is the tabloids, but probably in the current era in the real world is what you might call the social media. And in fact, even potentially the legacy media. And so once again, I don't want to go into what is going on in the current politics, but it is interesting that Tatsuya Endo brings these two types of characters into the spotlight, and it makes you wonder with regards to if he's trying to make a statement with regards to what's going on in this world. But in any case, having to listen to all of this, Yuri starts getting really tired of all of this statement. And you could tell that it is not one of the things that he cherishes, being a member of the secret police. And in fact, he does talk about the problem with all of these extremists these days, which of course, once again, is a reflection of what's going on in the real world. And his boss starts saying, well, it's probably part of the season. And his boss's boss, the chief, comes up and goes, well, maybe we could just relax and forget about the problems for a while and just go out for drinks. And considering how loyal Yuri is to his team, it's interesting to see that he actually does not go with them and in fact tells them that he has a date. Which makes everybody surprised until Yuri's boss says, yeah, most likely with his sister, which turns out to be the case. And what we find out is that ever since Yor has gotten together with Lloyd, the relationship between Yuri and Yor has become more distant. I don't think the feelings have become any more distant. It's just that their time together has become a lot more rare. And because of that, yeah, and knowing how Yuri is, yeah, you start getting that weird sort of feeling as you see Yuri happily come up to Yor to talk about how he is absolutely looking forward to the time tonight. Almost to the point where all the other people are feeling very uncomfortable watching him come up to Yor, and Yor is like, please be careful about the things that you say. And considering they have not been together for a while, of course, they start talking about how things are. And Yuri, being so happy, starts raving about all the accomplishments that he has done. And Yor, being a very proud sister of Yuri's, says how he has grown up since the old days. And so they go shopping, and it's in a shop that Yor would typically not go to because it's an extremely luxurious department store. And Yuri says that a lot of the superiors where he works tends to shop at this sort of area, which makes Yor surprised because she's like, these are really high quality items. And she starts looking at this really weird thing that she doesn't particularly want to get. But since Yuri sees her staring at it, he tries to go buy a boatload of these things, and Yor has to stop and say, I don't really want that thing, you know? And so Yuri's starting to feel like really bad because he can't buy anything for her, and he's starting to wonder, is Lloyd being very restrictive of Yor's shopping? And should he do something about it? And of course Yor's like, no, it's nothing like that. Now, of course, that doesn't stop Yuri from trying to buy something for Yor. And so finally, Yor comes to see some bedding and wants to buy these really cute bedding. And Yuri's like, that's adorable. It's the type of design that you used to like as a child. And of course, Yor answers, it's not for me, it's for Anya. Anya has been sleeping on the same bedding since they come together, and it's probably time to get a new one. Now, of course, that makes Yuri really anxious because he doesn't want to buy anything for that Chihuahua girl. He wants to buy something for Yor. But Yor is like, I don't really need anything. You know, maybe a toothbrush for Lloyd, in which case Yuri gets really even more angry having to buy something for that disgusting husband of hers. And so they go off to dinner, and Yor says that she will get some apple juice, and Yuri's constantly saying, you have to stop holding yourself back. You should get a glass of wine or something. And then all of a sudden Yor answers, well, if I start drinking, I tend to do some very questionable things with Lloyd, which makes Yuri go, oh, you better not drink then ever again. Wondering what Yor was doing. Yeah, of course, we all know what questionable things Yor did with Lloyd. One was an uppercut and another one was a high kick, right? But of course, Yuri's completely misunderstanding the situation. But in any case, he continues to go on that he really is worried about Yor. He really wants Yor to be very happy. And he's worried that she's not really meeting her desires, having to be locked up with Lloyd. And Yor's like, it's not like she's a prisoner of Lloyd's. And Yuri's like, are you sure you're not being brainwashed? Which Yor's like, no, of course not. So then Yuri asks, so do you have a life of your own? Do you do something besides having to be with the family? And of course, Yor starts talking about her relationship with Melinda. And of course, Yuri, being a secret police, knows all about her relationship with the former prime minister's wife. And so Yor starts talking about all the different things she does in life, including the friendships that she's starting to make with her co-workers in the office. But in the end, what she really enjoys is the time she has with Anya and the family. And she mentions why is because it reminds her of the time she had with Yuri when she was young. And Yuri starts saying, well, that doesn't make me feel any more comfortable because even in the old days, you used to sacrifice completely your happiness to take care of me. And Yor starts correcting, why do you say it like that? You make it sound like I was very unhappy taking care of you. In fact, it was probably the happiest times of my early life. And even now, I treasure the times that we had together. And it's because of you that it made me feel like it was worthwhile to work very hard. And in fact, when Yuri went off and became his own person, Yor became lonely because she was all by herself. And it's the first time Yuri realized that his success has actually been more hurtful to Yor than anything else. And so he asks, is that why you got married? And Yor says no. But considering that I have become married, I've realized that there are now many other people in my life. And with all the changes that I have seen in my life, I could actually sit back and see just how far you have come in your life, Yuri. But Yuri cannot accept that. Once again, it's acceptance because he starts telling her that he is actually lonely without her. To which Yor says, no, you shouldn't be. You should be very content because you have become such an accomplished person. And Yuri keeps yelling that, no, I have to become even better. And she yells so loud that they finally get kicked out of the restaurant. And so this is a very self-reflecting time for Yuri. Because probably for the first time, he's starting to understand how Yor feels these days. And considering how he feels at this time, he starts saying, why don't we throw it all away and go back to the small town that we came from? We were very happy at that time. And I could go back to doing the things that I did during that time. But Yor starts talking about how there is so much joy in the place that they're in right now. And there's so much objective to what she needs to do at this time. And Yuri starts reflecting on that and realizing that he has just as important objectives that he has to do, and he should take responsibilities of his own life. And this is a fairly sad moment, and it's one of those things that you see a lot in many of these stories, including the self-reflection that you may have in your own life, is that no matter how much you might want to go back to the old world, and even if you try to go back to the same location where you grew up, it's no longer the same because time doesn't work that way. You just have to keep on going forward with the life that you have. And Yuri, finally realizing that, understands this is not just about the geography, this is not just about the small town they grew up in. What he's realizing is that his relationship with Yor has ended. He is no longer the dependent child that has to be taken care of by Yor. And as much as he loved that life, it is no longer coming back. And so Yuri gives a little present to Yor, saying that he secretly purchased this while she didn't realize. And Yor thanks Yuri from the bottom of her heart. And you see this really wonderful parting of the two. And as much as it is just a parting of these two people, it is also a parting of a time that Yuri was longing for, but understands is no longer there. And as he's going back to his house, he notices that somebody is selling spice cakes, and that reminds him of the time when he used to beg Yor for those types of cakes when he was young. And since they didn't have that much money, they couldn't do it all the time, which indicated that whenever he did get a cake, he really cherished that time. And he comes back to his empty apartment, and the scene that you see here is very interesting. Yeah, I'll go over it a little bit as we go along. But he sits down, he has purchased those spice cakes, and he thinks about the time he really enjoyed the cakes with his sister. But she is no longer here, so although it's nostalgic to eat these spice cakes, it's not the same because he is eating them alone. And he knows that Yor has moved on and is enjoying the life that she has. And as much as he wants to be honest with her, he can't because there are so many things about his life that he can't show her now. And as much as this is about the secrecy of the secret police, I don't think it's all about that. I think it's the fact that he no longer can show the life that he has now, in the fact that it is the loneliness that he has despite all the successes that he's had, because he is all alone. And that is what I meant when you see him come back to his apartment. It looks exactly like the time when Yor was all by herself once Yuri left her. And so Yuri is right now in a position similar to what Yor was prior to meeting Lloyd. And the feelings that Yuri has probably are very reflective of the feelings Yor had to that time. But at that moment, we see something very interesting, which is that Yuri gets a call from his boss and says that they are still out drinking, and if he wants to join, he should. And his boss is like, yeah, you should come over. Chloe's missing you a lot. And Chloe's like, I am not, you know? But what this shows is that as much as he feels that he is alone, he has other people. And despite the fact that we do see the Ostanian secret police as this cold entity, amongst each other, they are good friends. And Yuri realizes that he has moved on in his own life as well. So despite this being a very small plot point with regards to Operation Strix, it is a growth that you see in Yuri. And what's interesting is we do see an introduction of Chloe more, and considering that we see him transitioning from his old life to accepting who he is at this time and realizing that he needs to move on, the fact that the author introduced Chloe at this time probably indicates that in the future there may be a relationship that happens between Yuri and Chloe. And I know a lot of people, including myself, was like, well, Yuri can get together with Fiona. But if you think about it, that doesn't make any sense. Fiona is a fanatic agent towards Westalis, and Yuri is a fanatic officer towards Ostania. So it doesn't make any sense that those two can get together. But Chloe may. And most likely, considering how much of a fanatic Yuri is, the only time he will recognize Chloe and befriend her closer is most likely during a mission. And so I got a feeling that in the future, something serious will happen in a mission between the two of them, and the situation may actually bring the two closer together. And so once again, this is a story with regards to acceptance. And despite the fact that Yuri is such a questionable character, you could see that he is moving forward, even with his fanaticism, with his life. And now that we've seen this particular chapter and why I feel this chapter is so important is you're starting to understand. Yes, a lot of people talked about Yuri being a very creepy character with regards to his relationship with Yor and how he romantically has a crush for Yor. But what you find out is that this isn't really a romantic relationship. As head over heels as he is for Yor, this is a platonic relationship, and you start understanding why this ended up being that way. Yuri never had a father. Yuri never had a mother. The only person Yuri could rely on was Yor. And considering Yor gave all her love to Yuri, you could understand just how attached he became to his sister. And so when other people started coming into their lives and Yor was the only person he cared for such a long time, you could start understanding why it ended up being that way. Yes, he is still a fanatic and it is very uncomfortable, and that is because this is a gag manga. And as you know, in gag mangas, they tend to amplify everything tenfold, whether it's Sanji's perverseness in One Piece, or Luffy's stupidity, or Goku's hunger for food. You know, all of that falls into being overly gag type. And you see it here as well, that it amplifies it for the comedy reasons. But you understand why he does have this feeling. Because just like if you were to take a 6-year-old child or a 10-year-old child who grew up only knowing his mother or his sister, and then all of a sudden in their pristine life, a boyfriend would come in or a stepfather will come in, you often see that there are tension between that child and the new parent or the new brother-in-law. And so considering how pampered Yuri was, you could understand that although from an intellectual point of view he kept on growing up, from a psychological one he remained a child because it was very comfortable to be that way considering how much he was pampered by Yor. But now he's understanding he has to grow up as well, and accept the life and the road that he has taken. And most likely this chapter is the first step in the way he's going to understand that he has a life of his own. And yes, it's very late in his time, but it is an interesting chapter with regards to how this character is realizing who he is. And so this is an acceptance of him with regards to his life and understanding that his sister, Yor, has accepted her life as well. And despite the fact that the road is very different and he does feel alone, he is actually not alone, and he has the comrades specifically of his own life. And so I found this chapter to be very interesting. Tatsuya Endo is making an interesting example with regards to how perception is brought out and how oftentimes a person's feelings can reflect their acceptance of situations that are going on. Now, the one last thing that I did want to talk about is Yuri's boss. Considering the fact that even other lesser characters like Chloe are already receiving names, for some reason Tatsuya Endo has not named Yuri's boss yet. We always know him as the superior lieutenant of the secret police. So why is that? Considering that Tatsuya Endo has creatively put names on much lesser characters over the series, how come this character does not have a name yet? And there has been some interesting speculation with regards to this character in the fan base. And one of the most interesting ones is one that I brought up during Lloyd's flashback when he was a child. I mentioned how although we saw in those flashbacks how the mother was killed, we never saw anything with regards to how the father was killed. Instead, we just were told the father went away and he never came back. So there was always that question, is the father dead? And if he is alive, how come he disappeared and never came back? And there is always that theory that maybe the father was a member of the Estonian Secret Service, and he was planted in West Dallas to help promote the war. But if that is the case, then what happened to him? And many of the people in the fan base often speculate maybe Yuri's boss is Lloyd's father. And if that is the case, maybe that is the reason why Tatsuya Endo is keeping this person's identity obscure, because eventually there may be a standoff between this character and Lloyd. And it was a curiosity. I'm not saying that it is, I'm not saying that it isn't. I don't see any clue to say one way or the other, but it is a curious point that was brought up, so I just wanted to bring it up in this chapter as well. But anyway, I found this chapter to be very interesting with regards to what Tatsuya Endo is trying to say, and I really don't know, but it was curious to see how he wrote this chapter with regards to Yuri's life. And it'll be interesting to see how Yuri continues to grow, but we'll have to wait for that in the future and when the next chapter comes out, and if it turns out to be with Yuri, I'll bring out another video. I don't think that's the case. This chapter gave closure all by itself, and we probably won't see Yuri for a while again. And so it'll be interesting to see what Tatsuya Endo brings up in the next chapter. But this is the chapter 114 discussion of Spy Family. If you read it, what'd you think about it? How do you feel about Yuri in this series? Any comments will be greatly appreciated. And until the next episode, happy manga reading, and as always, Jaya, nice day everyone.